You son of a...
Hello, I'm Valerie Taylor, and I'd like to tell you a few interesting things about one of my favourite fish. He is not my absolute favourite. There are a few fishes I like more, but he is certainly the most exciting and someone you have all heard about. Scientifically, he is called Carcharodon carcharias, but we all know him as the great white pointer, man-eater, or great white shark. The great white shark is not really white all over. Only the underside is white, a coloration common to most shark species. It's this unusual habit of casually swimming along the surface, snowy side up, that has caused it to be given the common name of great white shark. White sharks are not easily found. Filming them is an expensive business requiring a charter boat, huge amounts of bait, steel cages and patience. Ron and I have been coming here for years. Our boat, the 12-metre Temptation, is anchored near Dangerous Reef, South Australia. Large baits are hung over the side, ready to give our shark when he arrives. Immediately a great white reaches the boat, we feed him. This bait is attached to a wire trace, which slips between the teeth and therefore cannot be severed. There are no hooks. We do not want to hurt our sharks, just tease them into a feeding pattern so they will stay around for the filming. In 1965, Ron became the first person in the world to film a great white shark underwater in its natural element. He hung into the water from the tuna boat's back platform, pulling his body out when the shark came too close. This is why there are no cage bars in our first film about white sharks. It was an extremely risky method of filming these big predators. Several times the camera was actually bumped. Whites don't normally make a sudden rush, but cruise around at a steady pace. However, there can always be an exception to the rule, and Ron cannot relax for a second. That was a very close thing. No one is perfect. Even professionals like me can sometimes make a mistake or do something very silly. Good grief, what a messy performance! My diving booties were slippery with fish oil and I skidded off the swim platform before the cage was in position. It looks quite funny, but as there is a shark out there swimming around just under the surface, not without danger. These sharks are the average size for this area, around 4 metres in length and weighing approximately 800 kilos. They have never seen a cage before, so don't know what to make of it, and are constantly testing the metal with their teeth by bumping and biting around. The epitome of streamlined design, great whites appear to move without effort. The big black eye misses nothing, for they can see very well. The dark spots around his face are highly developed sensory organs capable of detecting the slightest changes in the surrounding water. One pushes his pointy nose through the window. It's only curiosity, not an attack. See how gently this one tests the steel bars with his bottom teeth. It's his way of feeling the cage. Ron is trying to attract this shark's attention by waving his hand around like something to eat. It's not dangerous, as Ron can withdraw his arm in a second, but the shark is not interested and swims away. This sequence perfectly illustrates how a shark takes a bait, being very careful, feeling for the hook before swallowing. The next shark we called Big Mama. She was 6 metres in length and would have weighed around 1,400 kilos. We were working on the opening scenes of a feature film when she arrived. Mama was an extremely aggressive female. Within minutes she had broken off her teeth, biting into the cage. She chewed onto everything, the propeller, the cage, the boat, and she did it non-stop all day. Sometimes we play with sharks, coaxing them into rising above the surface for small baits. These freeze frames show the amazing jaw action of this feeding shark and illustrate very well the white shark's incredible biting ability and the unusual way he can project his jaw. Fishermen sometimes use baited hooks hanging from a floating drum to catch big sharks. We found this petrol drum, crushed but still afloat, in Memory Cove, South Australia. There was a huge white shark attached to it. The hook had barely caught the flesh, and he probably would have pulled free, only a second white shark had torn several large mouthfuls from the captive's stomach. It is potentially dangerous for us to be swimming when we know there is another big shark around, but we feel that having already eaten so much, it would no longer be hungry. White sharks don't get it all their own way. This poor little fellow, less than 2 meters in length, is trapped in the mesh nets of southern Queensland. These nets kill not only sharks, but manta rays, dugong, turtles, dolphin, and many other innocent marine creatures. The white shark is still alive, but suffering from lack of oxygen. Using my regulator, I revive him by aerating the water around his mouth and gills. We free the shark and take him to an aquarium at Tweed Heads. He was pumping water nicely through his gills, but unfortunately died several hours later. Another filming job took us to Albany in Western Australia. This is the old shore-based fencing station. It's closed now, but when operating, hungry whites would often follow the whale catchers into Cheyenne Bay. The factory stood next to the slipway, where the whales were butchered for boiling down. During the peak hunting months, dead sperm whales were anchored in the bay to wait their turn on the slipway. Every few hours the station tug would tow some whales in. The sharks are not always there, and we sometimes have to wait. It was a good place to see great whites feeding, as they often did upon the buoyed whales. Already sharks have been chewing flesh from one dead whale. There was one shark around, but he was keeping away from the boats. Hunters frequently kill these big sharks, sometimes for sport, but usually for their teeth. This shark, a 5.5 metre male, over a period of 5 hours was harpooned, power-headed, and shot 4 times. I snorkeled down to photograph the dying predator. It's a sad sight. The fish had fought hard for his life against overwhelming odds and failed. We were responsible for shooting all the live shark footage seen in the films Jaws and Jaws 2. Filmmakers like us cannot go out and just find the sharks swimming around. As always, we have to go through the usual routine of attracting the sharks into our work area. At this time, Ron is underwater filming the sequences where the shark breaks up the cage. This is how it looked to me above water as the shark crashed around. He is not attacking the cage, but tangled in the metal bridle hanging from the winch. Eventually, the winch was torn from the boat and the shark freed itself. The cage was recovered in a very battered condition. We also go to Martha's Vineyard in the USA, where a major portion of Jaws was being filmed. Bruce, the 7.5 metre mechanical monster used when the actors and the shark had to be in close contact, was kept and maintained in a big barn. A real great white this large would certainly be a terrifying sight, yet in prehistoric times this would have been considered an average-sized shark. All those hydraulic tubes are to make the shark move. It took 5 men to work the mechanical monster, but the end result appeared to be quite convincing. In 1970, we were at Heron Island on the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef working on a film. Our star was this rather odd-looking dummy great white. Although the dummy shark is fairly large, there was no problem handling it above water, as it was hollow and fairly light. Once in the water, the trouble really began. The old saying, stiff as a board, described the toothy prop perfectly. Trying to make it swim realistically was a problem for both Ron and the underwater actors. It moved like a dud torpedo, and once pushed on its way was not easily stopped. It's hard enough filming underwater when everything goes according to plan. With this dummy shark, Nothing seemed to go right, and by the end of the day Ron was very frustrated. Great whites are most dangerous when they feel themselves to be trapped. On several occasions we have had great whites tangle themselves in the steel trace that attaches our cages to the boat. The first entangled shark appeared simply an unusual accident, but then it happened again. A 900-kilo great white pulls the cage around like a cork. Inside, Ron and I take a beating not from being pulled through the water, but from jolting into the metal frame. Eventually the shark tired, hanging unhappy and exhausted beneath us. Ron left the cage to film and I followed. This action is rather dangerous, as another shark could easily be around. Ron and I don't believe in wantonly killing any wild animals or letting them suffer. We take our shark into the shallows of dangerous reef. Small waves in the shallow water help revive it. A metal tag is placed in his dorsal fin. Then Ron inserts a thermometer into his back. This shows his body temperature to be higher than the surrounding water. He is released and swims away, no doubt bewildered by the experience. 6 months later, this tag was returned by the fisherman who had killed her. Over the years, we have noticed that great white sharks have a preference for warm, light colours. During these colour tests, we actually are proving something we already know. Great whites love bright colours. As you can see, the shark goes crazy on the orange vest, excited into a frenzy by colour alone. No food was in or attached to the dummy, so smell and taste are not the attraction. The teeth have deeply penetrated the wetsuit, exposing the foam plastic inside. In water, many metals produce an electrochemical field. It's also believed that sharks have an incredible sensitivity towards this field. We feel this vicious attack was prompted not by the human shape, but by an electrical field generated from the stainless steel mesh suit it was wearing. South Australian abalone divers have far more to fear from great whites than anyone else. They work underwater. One diver has been killed and many harassed, some in the most terrifying circumstances. These incidents prompted several enterprising fishermen to design and build a special cage capable of being propelled across the ocean floor. The small hose supplies clean breathing air to the diver, and the other, a larger volume of compressed air to drive the cage. Abalone are collected through the bars and carried inside the cage. As I have said before, it takes a lot of bait and patience to attract a great white for filming. Over the years, we have found that once a shark has been attracted by food, it can be trained to perform a simple food-orientated trick within a very short time. First, they must have no fear of the boat, so using a small piece of meat on a rope, I try to coax this shark into feeding near the stern. He has been swimming around the boat watching us for several hours, so I am now familiar to him. He grows less cautious and takes my baits more readily. Once they start feeding this way, they remain closer to the boat and the food supply, which is exactly what we want. I am now coaxing the shark into performing for me, using small baits as a reward. He learns quickly to take the fish, and an understanding develops between us. When I climb down onto the small mesh platform, he should have learnt I am not a piece of food, but rather the giver of food. No one has ever before hand-fed a great white this way. These sharks have the ability to reach up and drag a sea lion into the water, so could easily do the same to me. That I can stand here unmolested proves they are not normally attackers of man. Certainly it's risky, but I like the shark and feel confidence in him. He fumbles around, not sure of where the fish is, then tries again with more luck. These small fish are hardly a mouthful for this large predator, but he must be enjoying them. a little pat for being so cooperative. I felt very privileged that the shark accepted me this way. I hope that this film helps other people to understand white sharks a little better, and in doing so brings us one step closer to sharing the oceans in harmony.
Guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can learn about jaws, sharks, movie making and everything in between. Also be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok and Instagram, and be sure to check out our website, thedailyjaws.com. Until next time, we drink to your legs. Farewell and adieu.